All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I know some folks are trickling in from lunch still, but I think we're going to get started here. My name is Aaliyah Ned, and I'm Director of Government Relations for NCBA CLUSA. Again, no folks are coming back from the lunch buffet, but if you are heading out to our Hike the Hill this afternoon, we have a very packed afternoon, so I would encourage you to take a seat with your group leads over there. Group leads, can you wave your hands really quickly? Group leads all the way over there. Our fantastic NCBA CLUSA staff will be able to help you out if you're heading to Hike the Hill. So again, my name is Aaliyah Ned, and I'm Director of Government Relations for NCBA CLUSA. Today's lunch session is all about telling your co-op story in a way that is compelling to the policymakers and elected officials who can help support the co-op ecosystem. We'll start out with an Advocacy 101 session on co-op legislative priorities, and then move into some role-playing exercises to put our knowledge into practice. But to get us started, I want to first invite Diana Cott with Schools First Credit Union to the stage. Diana is the Vice President of Membership Development and Advocacy at Schools First Federal Credit Union. And I also want to recognize Schools First and True Stage for sponsoring this session and this afternoon's Hike the Hill event. So please join me in welcoming Diana to the stage and recognizing Schools First and True Stage for their generous support of this afternoon's programming.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. It really is our pleasure to be a part of this wonderful conference. I have a little secret to tell. I've been in the credit union movement for over 20 years. This is my first true cooperative conference that I've been to, and I am so inspired. This is awesome. So really, really, really happy to be a part of this. Telling your co-op stories. So part of my work at Schools First Federal Credit Union is telling our story. We were established in 1934. We'll be 90 years old next year. We're based in Tustin, California. Thank you for the gorgeous weather here too, by the way. It's really beautiful. And we were started by 126 school employees that pooled their funds together because they wanted access to better funds, better options for themselves. And now today we serve the entire state of California. We're still focused on school employees almost 90 years later. We have 70 branches, almost 30 billion in assets, and again, serving the entire state. So it really, really is our pleasure. And going into meeting with legislators, elected officials, members of our educational community, it really is just a pleasure to let them know about the good that we do for school employees throughout the state of California. And I have such great support from our history and culture team. We have a team dedicated to our history and culture based in our what we call our Dream Team values that keeps that story alive and well for us every day, and we make sure it's integrated into everything we do. It's always about the member. We utilize live, real members. We get the question, is that stock photography or are those real members? You go to our website, you see anything in our social media areas, and it is truly always about the member. Our message is always authentic. I think more and more every day, authenticity wins time and time again. And also, just thirdly, I try to keep in mind, you cannot tell your story enough. Even though you're the one doing most of the repetition time and time again, meeting with those members in your community or with legislators, the story never gets old. Keep it fresh, keep it alive, keep it moving. So again, I'm really pleased to be a part of today's fun, definitely will be fun, Aaliyah. And thank you again for allowing me to be here and learning so much more about the cooperative movement in general. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you again, Diana, and to True Stage and Schools First Federal Credit Union for supporting our advocacy and learning how to tell our co-op story. So the cooperative overview will start with a little bit of a background on co-ops, which I know you all are no stranger to as you do the good work on the ground. But highlighting this and talking about cooperatives is really the first step when it comes to telling your story and leveraging the difference that cooperatives can make in policymakers achieving their goal. And education in the spirit of our co-op principles and Principle 5 is the starting point, because how many of you have walked into a meeting, whether it's with your member of Congress or a local elected official, and you say you work with cooperatives or work for a cooperative or are a member owner of a cooperative, and they say, well, I've heard of co-ops, but I don't really know what a cooperative is. How many of you have heard that before? Raise your hands. And that's why, as you can see from all of the folks who raised their hands in this room, providing that first step, making them understand what crucial roles that co-ops play in our economy, and telling them the value that co-ops make inherently with our structure and our principles is really key. We know that across the country in the United States, there are 65,000 cooperative establishments, with 1 in 3 Americans being a member of a co-op. And the movement is much, much larger when we go internationally, and we are looking to support that ecosystem here domestically. And people turn to cooperatives. They were born out of addressing market failures, helping small players and small businesses gain that parity and compete with larger industry, and giving consumers that deliberate choice to better meet the common needs and aspirations of local communities. And we know the cooperative model makes a difference. We reinvest back into the local economy at higher rates. We create and maintain more high quality jobs. And we've seen the importance of the bullets here on the slides over the last 3 years, particularly as we've gone through global pandemics and then the economic ruptures that arose out of that and are seeking to recover. We know they're more responsive to community needs, and locally led capacity building and development is top of mind for policymakers across the board. And when we get down to the numbers, they have greater business survival rates. When we look at the numbers of cooperatives who, for example, received COVID relief assistance through the Paycheck Protection Program or economic injury disaster loans, and the percentage, the high retention rates of those businesses that are still around today. So to provide a little bit of background, once you've taken that step to educate your policymakers on the value that your cooperative has, we look at these priorities, and these priorities are amplified by the good work that you all are doing as we hear the various sessions and stories throughout the next 2 days, and start to think creatively about where we can go heading forward. And for NCBA Cluso, we are keenly focused on these priorities here on the screen, making sure that cooperatives are treated fairly within tax statutes that recognize that they are serving a public good. Co-ops are owned by the members of the community, and there is a multiplier effect when those dollars go to a co-op and have that favorable tax treatment that is reinvested back in that community. For opportunities, as we think over the next few days how we can remain resilient and ready to address future challenges, upcoming legislation such as the Farm Bill, which we'll touch on a little bit later here, or how to build a better world through supporting international cooperative development. Looking to the past for lessons learned and how we can keep the momentum moving forward, as sessions tomorrow on worker cooperatives and the momentum around that movement will touch on. How can we support small businesses and ensure that these community institutions remain viable and continue to support the local communities that have stakes in the community, which is inherent in our model, and creating a resilient nation by implementing new legislation. The challenges that we've seen over the past few years has highlighted the importance of being more resilient and future-proofing across the board, whether that's within the US or internationally as well. So how can we leverage the new streams of resources coming from the US federal government to ensure that we are more resilient moving forward and responding to the critical challenges of our time? Starting with tax treatment, we've highlighted the cooperative difference, and current federal tax policy recognizes that co-ops capture value for their member owners. And ensuring cooperative businesses are treated fairly at the end of the day and not put at a disadvantage is crucial to protecting, and what our government relations team remains focused on today and what we'll be talking about a little later on the Hill. Reauthorization of the Farm Bill. In creating a more resilient nation and looking for those opportunities, every 5 years, Congress passes legislation that sets national agriculture, nutrition, conservation, rural development, and forestry policy. This is known as the Farm Bill. All of USDA's programs, including the only federal program in the United States that is solely dedicated to cooperative development, the Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program. And so how can we address climate change within this legislation, or maybe look at ways to support rural economic development, starting with infrastructure and broadband, energy investments, as we recognize we need to transition, and the federal government has recognized through rural electric cooperatives and supporting that work and furthering it, and international food aid programs to support cooperative development. The RCDG program, when we start to look at these potential places where we can improve in our support of the co-op ecosystem, how can we maybe support multi-year grants that build capacity instead of making folks go back year after year? We know that true change takes a bit of time, and so maybe if there was a possibility to have a few years to implement a grant that you're getting versus going back year after year, we could have that long-term economic development that we're looking for. For food co-ops and producers, I mentioned a little bit earlier about the multiplier effect of cooperatives, and we know that providing nutrition assistance for the 41 million low-income families across the country who rely on these benefits, how can we use that to support food cooperatives, which in turn supports local producers, oftentimes sourcing 5 times more of local produce from farmers in the area. So putting back into our local communities. And maybe there's an opportunity because, again, education is key, right? Not everyone understands that cooperatives elect a board of directors, and that change that comes with going through that democratic process is not a change in ownership. It's just the cooperative model at play here. And bridging the digital divide. I keep referring to the last 3 years, and we knew it long before them, but especially, we know how crucial broadband is, from kids trying to go to school remotely to supporting or encouraging local businesses, as we saw an out-migration of people to more rural areas over the last few years. And electric co-ops are on the front lines of bridging that digital divide, because in 2023, especially, internet is a right for folks, and more than 200 co-ops are now deploying or creating plans with these new investments that are coming down the pipeline. So there's an opportunity to make sure that that connection is reliable, and we don't have to go back every single year to maybe try and lay new wire as new innovation is occurring within each industry. And building a better world. International cooperative development, as we see throughout the programming of the next 2 days, that NCBA CLOSA does work globally to build resilient communities and create those economic opportunities and strengthen cooperatives. So how can we leverage the opportunity of the Farm Bill, where many of these resources flow, to support USAID and USDA's programs like Food for Peace, and ensure that global food assistance, which is a national security priority, can continue and create more resilient local economies, while also helping farmers to adapt to climate change, or mitigating more severe droughts throughout the years, or supporting gender equity priorities. So how can we leverage these international cooperative development? And small business, turning it back to the Main Street Employee Ownership Act, where half of the nation's, we're in a current situation where half of the nation's small businesses are at risk of buyout or closure. Over 50% of small businesses are owned by people who are going to retire in the next 10 years. So what's gonna happen there? Are those businesses going to close? Are local communities going to lose their mom and pop shops that have been household institution? What's going to happen to those jobs? Our thoughts, and I think folks in the room would agree with us here, is that the better idea is to convert that business to a worker or consumer-owned cooperative. But to do that, we have to think creatively about how we can leverage federal resources through the Small Business Administration. There's a loan program right now that could help support this, but because they don't understand our model of one member, one vote, equal stakes within the business, folks can't get that loan. So how can we maybe talk about that to policymakers and the difference that your co-op would potentially be able to have in leveraging this financing when maybe you can't get it somewhere else? So recognizing that cooperative difference by waiving this requirement for cooperatives within the SBA's programs and creating a resilient nation. All of these put together really sets the stage for having those conversations and the moment that we're in when we approach policymakers. So how do you even prepare? Well, finding out who to talk to is the first step. Maybe look at your local government, what their priorities are, objectives are for the year. Rehearsing your co-op story, because folks only have a few minutes and short attention spans. So rehearsing that story and finding those relevant overlaps as you're looking for who to talk to with group members. Planning out their timeline. Are they looking at 2 years or the next 5 years or even in the next few months, as we saw during the pandemic when folks had to respond quickly and co-ops are well equipped to do so? And note what the priorities of that entity is. During the meeting, share what makes your co-op special. On my first day, which was the Impact Conference last year, I heard how modest everyone in this room can be, and we need you to brag a little bit. How are you impacting your community? Talk about how your co-op may benefit from increased access to capital or improved federal resources or better technical assistance to create climate mitigation and adaptation plans. Find the common ground. What do you have your fellow attendees have in common? What's that common identifying goal, whether it's economic development or climate or supporting producers or creating a resilient food system? What's that through line that you have with that group? So setting the stage, I'm gonna ask you to be a little bit interactive here as we're coming out of lunch and folks might be leaning a little bit towards a nap, but how would you tell your co-op story? I want you to get to know the folks at your table. Hopefully this will spark some new conversation. Talk to them, give them your elevator pitch, just like you're going into a policymakers meeting. What makes your co-op special? How are you impacting your community? Convey how your co-op may benefit from new resources or just educate someone about your co-op. And what do you and the folks at the table have in common? So we're gonna take 10 minutes to go through this exercise. If you want, chat amongst yourself, but I would encourage you, if you don't know the folks next to you, to go through some of these questions and we'll come back here. All right, everyone. I hear conversations are fading out a little bit. But it seems like conversations are going so well that folks don't want to stop sharing their co-op stories. Well, hopefully this means you all are learning something interesting about each other, hearing about new co-op sectors or new co-ops or work that maybe is inspiring you. And it seems like there's a lot of common ground. So raise your hand if you found something in common with your fellow attendees. All right, I got 1, 5, 10. Anyone in the back corner find something in common? Yes, love it. Love to see all of it. So taking those things you found in common, and after the meetings and small group discussions, we can keep it going. But make sure you're thanking people for sharing their experience with you and following up, particularly when it comes to policymakers. Let them know that you want to be a resource, whether that's for your elected officials or local economic development entities, or even the folks at the table. swap cards with each other, keep in those conversations, because as a community, we're stronger together, and we're excited to head as a community up to Capitol Hill, where we'll meet with senators and members in the House of Representatives to advocate for co-op priorities. Each group has a strong representation of various sectors doing different work across the board, but we know that we're stronger when we talk together, which is why cooperation among cooperatives is one of our principles. So we're about to head into a break, but I do want to move through some logistics beforehand because we have a packed afternoon with several moving pieces. First up, if you are a part of Hike the Hill, once we finish up here, you can head out to Holman Lounge in just a moment, which is where you picked up lunch earlier. Our volunteers and team leaders will be on hand to organize transportation for you and make sure we get to our almost 40 meetings on time this afternoon. So for folks who didn't make Hike the Hill this year, would highly, highly encourage you to keep an eye out for 2024 Impact. If you are here for the international track, your afternoon sessions will take place in the conference rooms on the opposite side of the atrium. If you need help navigating the press club, there's a floor plan on the Whova app. You can see it up on screen now. Maybe not, but once we break here, you can see it up on screen, or you can stop by the registration desk where my wonderful colleagues will be happy to help you. We've got 2 great sessions for our Impact International track this afternoon, one on the future of co-op leadership, and one on leveraging digital technology in a way that is ethical and sustainable. And finally, for our Impact Track attendees, you'll meet back in this room at 1:45 for our session on AI and equity. Okay, Hike the Hill, folks. You can follow me over to Holman Lounge. Thank you for your attendance and participation, but before we break, I will let our president and CEO take the stage here.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to tell you that, Aaliyah. Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Aaliyah. A great session on advocacy. This is the public awareness notification here. So, very quickly, for those particularly doing Hike the Hill, go to Holman in just 1 minute. As Aaliyah just said, for those who are moving to the international track, we'll have about a 15-minute break here. You'll go across the hall. For those who want to attend the generative artificial intelligence, you can stay right here, actually. So this is the part about the FEMA announcement again. So we'll start programming here at 1:35, the next panel on artificial intelligence. I think the international track is also going to aspire to start at 1:35. And then just reminding folks that at 2:20, if your phone is on, who knows what's going to happen to it? It's going to like buzz and make that nasty noise. So we're really going to try it at, by 2:15, please just have your phone turned off if you're comfortable with that. I think if we limit the number of phones where all that stuff is going to happen, we're just going to have a better experience. So please enjoy your break, and we will start promptly at 1:35. So please be back in here in 15 minutes at 1:30. Thank you very much.